When my nephew told me I was a lonely old fool, being played by a servant's child, I didn't argue. I just smiled. And that smile frightened him more than any shout ever could. Because he didn't understand. He thought he was seeing the confusion of a weak, grieving man. But really, he was seeing the end of his own carefully laid plans. And the beginning of something he could never, in his cold heart, comprehend. My name is Arthur Croft. For over 30 years, I lived in a beautiful, silent prison of my own making. My home, Cliff's Edge, was famous. For its views of the wild, grey ocean. For its collection of rare, impossible orchids. And for its ghost. That was me. The reclusive billionaire in the big, empty house. People in the village would whisper. They'd make up stories. But the truth was simpler, and sadder. I wasn't a ghost. I was just a man who had stopped living a long, long time ago. You see, I wasn't always a collector of flowers. I was an architect. I built things. I dreamed in steel and glass and soaring lines. My wife, Eleanor, she dreamed in color and light. And our son, Ben, he was our greatest collaboration. Our living masterpiece. We were a trio of dreamers. Then, one rainy night, coming home from a school play, a truck skidded through a barrier. And just like that, my world of lines and light and laughter, collapsed into silence. I sold the firm. I walked away from everything that smelled of my old life. I bought this isolated house on the cliff, a place with no memories. And I began to collect orchids. Not because I loved them, at first. But because they were fragile. They demanded absolute, silent attention. They were a perfect distraction from the screaming quiet inside me. My days became a routine. A wake up. A walk through the glass-domed conservatory. Check the humidity. Study the blooms. A meal, alone, in the dining room that could seat 20. Stare at the ocean. Go to bed. Repeat. For years. The housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, would come and go like a whisper. The only voices were the wind, and the waves, and the past, always whispering in my ear. Everything changed the day the new groundskeeper arrived. His name was Leo. A quiet, capable man with kind eyes and work-worn hands. He came with his daughter, Lena. She was 16. All sharp angles and silence, with eyes that saw too much. Leo had gotten the job because he was the only applicant willing to live in the old gatekeeper's cottage, and because he understood exotic plants. He lost his wife a few years back, Mrs. Higgins told me. They were making a fresh start. I just nodded. Their tragedy was not my business. My world was the house, the conservatory. Theirs was the gardens. We would exist in separate orbits. That was the rule. For a few weeks, it was. I'd see Lena sometimes, walking from the cottage to the bus stop for school, her head buried in a sketchbook. She never waved. I never acknowledged her. It was easier that way. No connections. No complications. Then, one morning, I found the first drawing. It was on the stone bench in the rose garden, the one that looks out to sea. A single piece of plain paper, held down by a smooth, grey pebble. On it, in pencil, was one of my rarest orchids, the Phalaenopsis amabilis. But it wasn't just a drawing. It was a study. She hadn't just drawn the flower. She had drawn its architecture. The curve of the petal, the delicate strength of the stem, the hidden complexity of the blossom. It was precise. It was beautiful. It was the way I used to see the world, before the world went dark. I stood there for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. I looked around. No one. Just the sigh of the wind through the pines. I took the drawing inside. The next week, there was another. This time, it was the spiral of a fiddlehead fern emerging from the soil. The detail was astonishing. The tiny, hairy fibers. The promise of unfurling life. She had signed this one, in tiny letters in the corner. Lena. It became our silent conversation. Every Friday, a new drawing. I never saw her leave them. She was like a garden spirit. And I began to leave things in return. Not on the bench. That felt too direct. But I'd leave a book on architecture on the potting shed table. A rare, high-quality set of drawing pencils, still in their box, near where she caught the bus. Once, a beautiful, empty leather-bound sketchbook. I'd check later. The book would be gone. The pencils, taken. The silence between us remained, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with this quiet sharing of seeing. One afternoon, a fierce spring storm rolled in from the ocean. The rain was horizontal. I was in my library, the one room that still felt like me, with its shelves of design books and drafting tables covered in dust sheets. I saw a figure running through the downpour towards the cottage, schoolbag held over their head. It was Lena. And as she ran, the wind caught her sketchbook, tore it from her bag, and sent pages scattering across the muddy lawn. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and went out. The wind nearly knocked me over. Together, wordlessly, she and I chased the floating, soggy pages. We rescued most of them. We were both soaked to the skin, standing in the sheeting rain. I looked at the page in my hand. It wasn't a plant. It was a building. A fantastical, beautiful structure that seemed to grow from a cliffside, part stone, part living vine. It took my breath away. "You should get inside," I said, my voice rough from lack of use. She just looked at me, rain streaming down her face. Then she pointed to the page in my hand. "It's for the West Cliff," she said, her voice quiet but clear against the storm. "Where the old boathouse is falling down. It could be a studio. For the light." I stared at her. Then at the drawing. The talent was, it was raw, untrained, but innate. It was a gift. The same gift Ben had shown. A pain, sharp and fresh, lanced through me. But with it came something else. A feeling I thought was extinct. Interest. "Come inside," I said. "Before you catch your death." That was the day the orbits collided. I brought her into the library, sent Mrs. Higgins for towels and tea. Lena stood there, dripping on the Persian rug, her eyes wide as she took in the room, the shelves, the rolled blueprints, the dormant drafting tables. It was like watching someone walk into a church for the first time. You built things?" she asked, her eyes on a model of a bridge I'd designed a lifetime ago. "Once," I said. "A long time ago." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "My mom, she wanted to be an artist. She said seeing things truly is the first step to making anything beautiful." Her words hung in the air. Seeing things truly. Isn't that what her drawings were? She saw my orchids not just as pretty flowers, but as structures of wonder. "Would you like to learn?" The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. "How to turn what you see, into something you can build." She looked at me, and in her young face, I saw a hunger that mirrored my own long-ago hunger. She nodded. And so, a new routine began. Every Tuesday and Thursday, after school, Lena would come to the library. I cleared the dust from a drafting table for her. I dug out my old tools, the T-squares, the triangles, the fine lead pencils. We started with the basics. Orthographic projection. Scale. The poetry of a clean, clear line. I was rusty, but it came back to me. And she was a natural. She learned with a fierce, quiet concentration. She asked intelligent questions. She'd take a concept and play with it in her sketchbook, coming back with ideas that were fresh and unexpected. Slowly, the library came back to life. The smell of paper and pencil shavings replaced the smell of dust. We'd work in comfortable silence, or I'd tell her stories of famous buildings, of engineering problems solved. Sometimes, she'd tell me about school, about a teacher she liked, about how her dad was trying to grow tomatoes. Simple, normal things. They were like windows into a world I had forgotten. Mrs. Higgins would bring us tea and biscuits, a small, knowing smile on her face. Leo, her father, was hesitant at first. He came to see me one evening, cap in hand. "Mr. Croft, sir. I'm grateful for your kindness to Lena. But, she's not bothering you? Taking up your time?" "Leo," I said, and I meant it. "She is the only thing in this house that isn't taking up my time. She is giving me some back." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and saw the truth of it. He nodded, his shoulders relaxing. "She talks about it non-stop. The things you're teaching her." "Thank you." It was the most human connection I'd had in decades. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet sound of a pencil on vellum. The shared focus over a difficult detail. It was healing something in me I thought was broken forever. I began to think of the future. Not my own, that seemed short and set. But of Lena's. I could set up a trust. A scholarship. Ensure that rare talent wasn't lost to circumstance. For the first time since the accident, I felt a sense of purpose. A reason to look beyond my orchids and my grief. But Cliff's Edge was not just my home. It was an asset. A jewel. And there were others who had their eyes on it. My only living relative was my nephew, Julian. My sister's son. He was a sleek, sharp man from the city, a financier. He visited once a year, like clockwork. The visit was always the same. He'd arrive in an expensive car. He'd make polite, hollow conversation about the market. He'd walk through the house, his eyes not seeing the beauty, but calculating the value. The Georgian moldings. The panoramic views. The land. He'd ask, always casually, if I'd gotten my affairs in order. He was the sole beneficiary of my will. A will written in a fog of grief a month after the funeral. At the time, he was the only family I had left. I hadn't looked at it since. His annual visit was due. I felt a new anxiety about it. Not for myself, but for our quiet, precious routine. I considered telling Lena not to come that week. But that felt like hiding something pure. So I didn't. Julian arrived on a Tuesday. Right in the middle of our lesson. I heard his car on the gravel. Mrs. Higgins showed him into the library. He stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. Me, leaning over Lena's shoulder, pointing at a perspective drawing she was struggling with. The two drafting tables, side by side, covered in work. The warm lamplight. The life in the room. His smooth, practiced smile froze on his face. His eyes, cold and assessing, flicked from me, to Lena, to her drawing, and back to me. "Uncle Arthur," he said, his voice too bright. "I didn't realize you had company." "Julian," I said, straightening up. "This is Lena. She's been learning architectural drafting." Lena, sensitive to the atmosphere, had gone very still. She gave a small, polite nod. "Hello." Julian didn't acknowledge her. He walked further into the room, picking up a model she'd made of balsa wood, a delicate, cantilevered structure. "Charming," he said, putting it down as if it were dirty. "And how did this arrangement come about?" His tone was like a drop of ink in clear water. It spread, poisoning the air. Lena flushed. I felt a slow, old anger begin to simmer in my chest. "Lena has a remarkable talent," I said, my voice even. "We've been working together for some months now." "We," Julian repeated, as if the word was absurd. He finally looked at Lena. And your father is? He's the groundskeeper, Lena said, her voice quiet but firm. Ah. That single syllable was loaded with a lifetime of contempt. He turned his back on her, addressing me as if she had vanished. Uncle, might I have a word? In private? In the hall, his mask fell completely. Arthur, what in the world are you thinking? He hissed. A servant's child? In your library? At your drafting table? She is a gifted young woman, I said, coldly. And she is my guest. Your guest? He let out a short, derisive laugh. Uncle, please. You're a wealthy, elderly, lonely man. She's a teenager from a modest background. This looks terrible. It looks like manipulation. Are you giving her things? Money? The implication hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just disapproving. He was constructing a narrative. A dangerous one. Get out, Julian, I said, my voice low. Or what? He sneered, his own anger showing. You'll cut me out of the will. The will that names me, and only me. You're not thinking clearly. This isolation, this grief, it's left you vulnerable. And people, he glanced back towards the library door, certain people, can smell that vulnerability from a mile away. That was the moment I saw him for what he truly was. Not family. A predator. Waiting for his inheritance to fall ripe from the tree. Our visit is over, I said, turning away. This isn't over, Uncle, he called after me, his voice slick with false concern. I'm worried about you. Truly. I think I may need to get some help for you. The threat was clear. After he left, the library felt tainted. Lena had packed her things quietly. She stood by the door. Mr. Croft. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't, Lena, I said, and my heart ached at the worry in her eyes. The trouble was already here. It just finally showed its face. Please. Come back on Thursday. As usual. She nodded, but the ease between us was fractured. Julian's poison was already working. He didn't wait long. Letters started to arrive. From a lawyer I didn't know. Ominous, formal language about concerns for my welfare and potential undue influence. Mrs. Higgins reported that Julian had been in the village, talking to people at the pub. Asking questions about Leo. About Lena. About how much time they spent at the main house. Spreading the soft, insidious rumor of manipulation. Then, Dr. Evans, my long-time, kindly physician, came for his regular checkup. He seemed uncomfortable. Arthur, he said, putting his stethoscope away. I had a call from your nephew. He's quite concerned. He's suggesting a full cognitive assessment. He's even mentioned the possibility of appointing a conservator, given your age and isolation. A conservator. Someone to take control of my life, my finances, my home. Julian's plan was now horrifyingly clear. Have me declared incapable, seize control, and evict the manipulative influences, Lena and her father. All while posing as the concerned, dutiful nephew. I felt a cold fury, but also a chilling fear. He was using the system. Using my grief, my age, my newfound connection against me. I thanked Dr. Evans and told him I'd consider it. After he left, I sat in my study, staring at the raging ocean. I felt trapped. The law was a blunt instrument, and Julian was wielding it. It was Lena who, unknowingly, handed me the key. She came for her lesson a few days later, her face pale. She wasn't her usual, focused self. She was distracted, upset. Lena. What's wrong? She bit her lip. It's probably nothing, Mr. Croft. It's just, my dad. He's been trying to sort out my mom's old things. There were some papers. Bank statements from an account she had. He didn't know about it. She hesitated. He showed them to me because there were some weird transactions. Big money going out, right before she died. To a company he'd never heard of. He's been trying to find out what it was for, but he's hitting walls. It's been eating at him. A cold suspicion began to form in my mind. Do you remember the name of the company? She nodded. Sylvan Holdings. Dad said it sounded fancy, but he can't find any record of it. Sylvan Holdings, I knew that name. It was the investment vehicle for the Croft Family Trust. A trust that provided a generous annual stipend to my sister, and now, to Julian. A trust one had not looked at in over a decade, leaving its management to the family lawyers, and, as my sister had requested before she died, to Julian himself, to learn responsibility. May I see the statements? I asked, my voice calm. When Leo brought them over later, my suspicion turned to ice-cold certainty. The amounts leaving Sylvan Holdings matched, almost to the penny, mysterious administrative fees and portfolio rebalancing costs listed in the trust summary statements I received, statements Julian had assured me were routine. The dates coincided with periods just before my sister's medical bills soared. He hadn't just been stealing from a trust. He'd been stealing from his dying mother. And from me. He was not just greedy. He was a viper. Leo, I said, looking at the good, honest man before me. This is very serious. And it may be connected to me. May I keep these? I promise you, I will get to the bottom of it. He trusted me. He nodded. That night, the ghost of Arthur Croft, the recluse, finally went to bed. And Arthur Croft, the architect, the fighter, the man who had built an empire from nothing, woke up. I had a weapon now. But I needed an ally. I called the one person I knew who was more feared in courtroom than Julian could ever be in a boardroom. Her name was Miriam Thorne. She was a forensic accountant and legal investigator. 30 years ago, she had saved my firm from a ruinous fraud. She was relentless, brilliant, and had no patience for men like Julian. Arthur Croft, her familiar, no-nonsense voice came down the line. I thought you'd fallen off the edge of that cliff by now. I need your help, Miriam. My nephew is trying to have me declared incompetent. And I believe he's been embezzling from the family trust for years. There was a pause. Then, the sound of a pen being clicked. Tell me everything. And I did. I told her about the loneliness. About Lena. About Julian's threats. About the bank statements. For the first time, I laid out the whole, sad, hopeful story. All right, she said when I finished. Send me everything you have on the trust, all correspondence with Julian, and those bank statements. Don't confront him. Act confused. Act old. Let him think he's winning. I'll be in touch. A plan, cold and precise, began to take shape. Julian wanted a war fought with medical reports and petitions for conservatorship. I would fight a war he never saw coming, with balance sheets, forensic trails, and the law. The confrontation came 3 weeks later. Julian arrived, not alone. He brought a Dr. Palmer, a sleek psychiatrist with a too-easy smile, and a lawyer named Greer. They descended on Cliff's Edge like a professional siege. They were there for a wellness intervention. They found me in the conservatory, pretending to be intently focused on repotting an orchid. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from suppressed rage. Uncle, Julian began, his voice dripping with faux sadness. We're all so worried. This isolation, this fixation on that girl, it's not healthy. Dr. Palmer here just wants to talk to you. Assess things. For your own good. I looked at them. The doctor with his empty eyes. The lawyer with his sharp suit. My nephew with his hungry gaze. I saw it all. The culmination of his greed. My own good, I repeated softly. I put down the trowel, wiped my hands on a cloth. You know, Julian, I've been thinking a lot about the past lately. About your mother. My sister. She was so proud of you. She trusted you with everything. He shifted, uneasy at the change in topic. This isn't about mother, Arthur. This is about you. Oh, but it is, I said, my voice gaining strength. She trusted you with the Sylvan Holdings Trust. To manage it. To care for it. I looked at Lawyer Greer. Do you know much about Sylvan Holdings, Mr. Greer? The lawyer frowned. I'm aware of it, yes. It's part of your estate. Managed by my nephew here, I said. I walked slowly to a nearby table where I had placed a simple manila folder. I've been going over the statements. So many fees. So many costs. It's confusing for an old man. I opened the folder. But then, I had some help. From a very thorough friend. Miriam Thorne. Do you know that name, Mr. Greer? The lawyer's face went ashen. Every lawyer in the city knew Miriam Thorne's name. She was the end of careers. Julian's confidence cracked. What is this? Some senile fantasy? I ignored him, addressing Greer. Ms. Thorne traced some very interesting transactions. From Sylvan Holdings to a series of shell companies, and then, into the personal accounts of one Julian Croft. Over $200,000, over the last 8 years. Coinciding, oddly, with periods of his mother's severe illness. Hospital bills, I believe. The silence in the conservatory was absolute, broken only by the drip of the watering system. You have no proof, Julian whispered, but the terror in his eyes was proof enough. I have bank statements from an unrelated account that provided the first thread, I said calmly. Miriam has the rest. The forensic trail. The emails. She's filed a report with the district attorney's office. And she sent a copy to the Bar Association, Mr. Greer, regarding your firm's negligent, or perhaps complicit, oversight of the trust you were supposed to be advising. Greer took a step back, as if from a contagion. I had no knowledge of any of this. My dealings were solely with Mr. Croft here on the conservatorship petition. Based on what? I asked, turning to Dr. Palmer. Based on your professional opinion, Doctor. The one my nephew paid you $15,000 to provide. The doctor spluttered. That's a lie. That was a consultation fee. A fee for a consultation that hadn't happened yet? I asked. Miriam has that transfer, too. And the email where Julian outlines exactly what symptoms he needed you to document. I looked at my nephew. The predator was now cornered, trembling. All his sleekness, his sharpness, was gone. He was just a scared, greedy boy who had been caught. You wanted to prove I was being manipulated, Julian, I said, my voice now quiet, filled with a profound sadness. But the only manipulator here was you. You manipulated your mother's trust. You tried to manipulate doctors and lawyers. You thought my loneliness was a weakness you could exploit. But you were wrong. It was in the quiet, in the loneliness, that I finally learned to see clearly again. To see true talent. To see genuine kindness. And to see a thief. He had no words. The elaborate stage he'd built for his triumph had collapsed beneath him. Get out of my house, I said, not raising my voice. The next time you are here, the police will be with you. And it will be to remove you in handcuffs. They left. Julian, shattered. The lawyer, panicked. The doctor, disgraced. I stood among my orchids, the adrenaline draining away, leaving me tired to my bones, but clean. The poison was gone. The aftermath was quiet. The district attorney pressed charges. Julian, to avoid a worse fate, pleaded guilty to embezzlement. He repaid what he could and received a suspended sentence, but his reputation, his career, were dust. The legal and medical boards had their own proceedings. The conservatorship petition was withdrawn, of course. But the real change wasn't in a courtroom. It was at Cliff's Edge. The next Tuesday, Lena came for her lesson. She stood in the doorway of the library, hesitant. "It's over," I said to her. "He won't be bothering us again." She came in, but she didn't go to her drafting table. She walked over to the window. "He tried to take everything from you," she said softly. "He tried," I agreed. "But he failed. Because he was fighting for things. For money, for property." I paused, finding the words. "I was fighting for people." She turned to look at me, her young face wise. "My dad says we should leave. That we've brought you nothing but trouble." My heart clenched. "Is that what you want?" She shook her head. "No." "Then neither do I," I said. "This house, it was a museum. Then it became a fortress under siege. Now, I looked around the sunlit library. Now, I'd like it to be a workshop again. A place where we build things. Not just drawings. A future. And that is what we did. With Miriam Thorne's fierce help, I rewrote my will. It was no longer a simple, grief-stricken document. It was a blueprint. A large portion of the estate was set aside to fund the Eleanor and Ben Croft Foundation, to provide scholarships for students from ordinary backgrounds with extraordinary talent in the arts and sciences. Lena was named as the first lifetime beneficiary, her education secured all the way through university and beyond. But more importantly than any document, our lives knitted together. Leo became more than a groundskeeper, he became the estate manager, his practical wisdom a perfect balance to my old world ways. Lena's talent blossomed under proper tutelage. I hired a retired professor from the architecture school to come tutor her twice a week. Her designs grew more confident, more breathtaking. One afternoon, she presented me with a new drawing. It was a redesign of the old, falling-down boathouse on the West Cliff. But it wasn't just a studio. It was a home. A beautiful, modern, light-filled structure that seemed to grow from the rock, with a greenhouse wing for orchids and a vast window facing the sea. "It's for you," she said, shyly. "A proper studio. And, maybe, if you wanted, you could live down there. It's smaller. Cozier. And the main house," she trailed off. "The main house," I finished, my throat tight, "should be a place filled with life. Not a monument." I looked at the drawing, seeing not just a building, but a gesture of pure, selfless love. She was designing me a new beginning. "It's perfect. We built it. It took 2 years. And during that time, Cliff's Edge changed. Students from the foundation would come for summer workshops, filling the old halls with debate and ideas and noise. The dining table was rarely empty. Leo met someone, a wonderful woman from the village who loved to garden. Lena got into a top architecture school. My life, which had been a single, thin line of existence, exploded into a tapestry of connection. The day I moved into the new boathouse studio, I stood on its deck, looking back up at the great house on the cliff. Lights were on in many windows. I could hear laughter floating down on the breeze. It was no longer my silent prison. It was a living, breathing thing. A legacy not of stone and money, but of second chances. Julian had been right about one thing, in his cruel, twisted way. I had been vulnerable. Grief had left me open. But he mistook the nature of that opening. He thought it was a weakness to be exploited. He didn't understand that the heart, when broken open, can let in two things, poison, or light. He tried to pour in his poison. But Lena, she had simply let in the light. A quiet, persistent light, in the form of pencil drawings left on a garden bench. So, you see, when he called me a lonely old fool, I smiled. Because I was no longer lonely. And the only foolish thing I had done was believe, for too many years, that my story was over. It wasn't. It was just waiting for the right person to help me draw the next chapter. Family isn't always the name you're born with. Sometimes, it's the people who see the true structure of your heart, and help you build something beautiful from the ruins. They are the gardeners of the soul. And I learned, far too late and just in time, that the most precious things in life aren't collected. They are planted. And with a little care, even in the stoniest ground, they can bloom.